They are the ultimate hijackers. They get into cells, they make millions of copies of themselves. They have literally shaped the evolution of every single species on this planet. But there's this huge, profound mystery at the very heart of what they are, and we're going to get into it.
I mean, they act with such purpose, right? They invade, they replicate, and over millions of years they evolve with this just terrifying efficiency. They're constantly adapting to new hosts, new environments. They are, without a doubt, one of the most powerful forces in all of biology.
But here's the kicker, the paradox that has had scientists scratching their heads for more than a century. For all of this incredibly dynamic, lifelike behavior, we're still not sure if they're actually alive. And this one question, it pushes the very boundaries of how we define life itself.
So to even try to answer that, we have to start with a baseline. What are the rules? What does biology's official checklist for life even look like?
Okay, so here's the deal. For something to be considered alive, it usually has to tick a few very important boxes. It's got to be made of cells, it needs to have its own metabolism to make energy, it has to maintain a stable internal environment, that's called homeostasis, and, critically, it needs to be able to grow and reproduce all on its own. So the big question is, how do viruses measure up?
Well, if we're being strict and we stick to that biological checklist, the case against viruses being alive looks pretty darn strong. In fact, they fail on some of the most basic points.
And this, right here, really lays out the whole problem. You see cellular life on the left, it's got all the machinery. But viruses, not so much. They don't have cells. They're essentially just a piece of genetic code, DNA or RNA, wrapped up in a little protein shell. They have zero metabolism of their own, can't make energy, can't build proteins. To do anything at all, they have to pull off that hijack of a living cell and completely reprogram its machinery.
And this is what's so wild. When a virus is just floating around outside of a host cell, it's completely inert. It's no more alive than a grain of salt. I mean, you can literally crystallize viruses, put them in a jar on a shelf for years, and they'll just sit there. A totally lifeless package of chemicals, just waiting.
So for a really long time, that was pretty much the end of the story. Case closed. Viruses were just complicated, non-living chemicals. But then, in the early 2000s, scientists made a discovery that threw a massive wrench in everything and completely blew the debate wide open again.
So say hello to the giant viruses. And when I say giant, I mean these things are enormous. The first one they found, called mimivirus, was so big they actually thought it was a bacterium at first. Just looking at them, you can tell they are a world away from the tiny, simple viruses we used to think about. Their size and their complexity were just shocking.
But the real bombshell was what they found inside. When scientists cracked open their genomes, they found something that was supposed to be completely impossible. Genes for doing metabolism. Genes for things like the TCA cycle, which is one of the core ways that living cells make energy. Finding these genes in a virus was like popping the hood of a bicycle and finding a V8 engine. It made absolutely no sense.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, it did. Scientists found out that these giant viruses can get infected themselves. This little diagram shows a smaller virus called Sputnik actually hijacking the replication machinery of a giant virus. So let me say that again. These giant viruses can get sick. And if getting sick isn't a sign of being alive, I don't know what is.
This discovery is what led the virologist Jean-Michel Clevery to say this. He said, "There's no doubt this is a living organism. The fact that it can get sick makes it more alive." I mean, the argument was becoming impossible to ignore. These things were blurring the line in a way science had never, ever seen before.
Now, these discoveries didn't just mess with our definition of life. They forced us to ask an even deeper, more fundamental question. If some viruses are this complicated, then where in the world did they come from in the first place?
So right now, there are three main ideas on the table. The first, the regressive theory, suggests that maybe these giant viruses used to be complex, free-living cells that just became parasites and shed a bunch of genes they didn't need anymore. The second, the progressive theory, argues they might have come from bits of genetic code that just escaped from other organisms. But, oh man, the third one is the most radical by far.
Okay, so buckle up for this one. The virus-first theory suggests that viruses might actually be older than cells. In this scenario, they aren't some weird branch on the tree of life you see here. They are relics from its very, very roots. The idea is that they evolved from the first self-copying molecules in the primordial soup, even before Gutta, the last universal common ancestor of all cellular life. If that's true, it would make viruses not just a form of life, but maybe one of its oldest ancestors.
So, with all of this totally conflicting evidence, where does that leave us today? Well, it's become pretty clear that the old definitions, that old checklist, just aren't cutting it anymore. We have to start thinking about viruses and maybe life itself in a whole new way.
And we have to take them seriously, because their importance is just undeniable. They aren't just some outside attackers. They are literally woven into the fabric of who we are. Get this, nearly 8% of your own human genome is made up of ancient viral DNA that got stitched into our ancestors' code millions of years ago. They are a fundamental part of our story.
So, to try and solve this paradox, some scientists have come up with this really clever concept called the virocell. The idea is pretty simple. The little inert virus particle, the virion, that's not the living thing. No, the true living phase of the virus is the host cell after it's been infected, once it's been turned into a tiny virus factory. So in this view, the virus is only really alive when it's taken over a cell.
And this perspective is leading to an even bigger, bolder idea, a proposal to totally redefine life. Instead of just one category of life, maybe there are two. You'd have ribosome-encoding organisms, that's us, and all cellular life that can build its own protein factories, and then you'd have capsid-encoding organisms, that's the viruses, which carry the blueprints for their protective shells but have to borrow all the other machinery.
So, are they alive? You know, the best answer might just be that they're both, and they're neither. They seem to occupy this really unique space, this gray area, that's like a bridge between the simple, predictable world of chemistry and the incredibly complex, dynamic world of biology.
Ultimately, what viruses do is force us to ask these enormous questions. Could they be living fossils from the dawn of replication? Are we looking at a window into some ancient pre-cellular world? There's so much more than just biological puzzles. They're these powerful evolutionary forces, ancient relics, and a profound reminder that the mystery of what it even means to be alive is far, far from solved.